Good morning to all. I am R. Velanganni, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, Faculty of Arts and Science, BIHER, Chennai. Now I am going to handling the subject of Financial Management, subject code U18 MCBC 404, covering the topics of capital structure, meaning, definition, importance of capital structure, factors determining capital structure, determining debt and equity proportion, significance and limitations of debt and equity ratio, theories of capital structure. Now we discuss one by one. First, we discuss meaning and concept of capital structure. What do you mean by capital structure? The term capital structure means the arrangement of the various parts. So, capital structure means the arrangement of capital from different sources so that the long-term funds needed for the business are raised. Thus, capital structure refers to the proportions or combinations of equity share capital, preference share capital, debentures, long-term loans, retained earnings, and other long-term sources of funds in the total amount of capital which a firm should raise to run its business. That means in business, the finance manager have to raise the capital. So he has to mix the combination of capital in the proportion of long-term loans, retained earnings, and debentures, and preference share capital, and equity share capital. This is the meaning of capital structure. Next, definition of capital structure. Capital structure refers to the mix of long-term sources of funds, such as debentures, long-term debts, preference share capital, and equity share capital, including reserves and surplus. Next, capital structure is the combination of debt and equity securities that comprise a firm's financing of its assets. Next is the importance of capital structure. Number one, increase in value of the firm. Number two, utilization of available funds. Number three, maximization of return. Number four, minimization of cost of capital. Number five, solvency or liquidity position. Number six, flexibility. Number seven, undisturbed controlling. Number eight, minimization of financial structure. Now we discuss one by one. First one is the increase in value of the firm. The capital structure is very useful to a sound capital structure of a company, helps to increase the market price of shares and securities. Here that securities means debt and equity ratio. In turn, lead to increase in the value of the firm. The capital structure is very useful to the increase the value of the firm. Next is the second one, utilization of available funds. What are the funds available in our business? A good capital structure enables a business enterprise to utilize the available funds fully. A properly designed capital structure ensures the determination of the financial requirements of the firm and raise the funds in such proportions from various sources for the best possible utilization. A sound capital structure protects the business enterprise from overcapitalization and undercapitalization. Here, utilization of available funds means in this business, we have to use the funds very carefully and utilized. Next is the maximization of return. A sound capital structure enables management to increase the profits of a company in the form of return to the equity shareholders. That means increase in earnings per share. This can be done by the mechanism of trading on equity. That is, it refers to the increase in the proportion of debt and capital in the capital structure, which is the cheapest source of capital. If the rate of return on capital employed, shareholders fund plus long-term borrowings exceeds the fixed rate of interest paid to debt holders, the company is said to the trading on equity. In this third one, maximization of return. In our business, we have to maximize our return. That means profit or retained earnings. We have to maintain the maximization of return. Next is the minimization of cost of capital. A sound capital structure of any business enterprise maximize shareholders' wealth through minimization of the overall cost of capital. This can also be done by incorporating long-term debt capital in the capital structure, as the cost of debt capital is lower than the cost of equity, or preference share capital, since the interest on debt is tax deductible. Here we have to minimize the cost of capital. That is, cost of capital means purchasing raw materials, goods and etc. Next is the solvency or liquidity position. A sound capital structure never allows a business enterprise to go for too much raising of debt capital, because at the time of poor earning, the solvency is disturbed for compulsory payment of interest to the debt supplier. So we have to maintain the liquidity position. Next is the flexibility. A sound capital structure provides a room for expansion or reduction of debt capital, so that according to changing conditions, adjustment of capital can be made. So here the business is always in flexibility condition. Next is the undisturbed controlling. A good capital structure does not allow the equity shareholders control on business to be diluted. Here, the capital structure does not allow the other shareholders. Next is the minimization of financial risk. If debt component increases in the capital structure of a company, the finance risk, that is payment of fixed interest charges and repayment of principal amount of debt in time, will also increase. A sound capital structure protects a business enterprise from such financial risk through a judicious mixes of debt and equity in the capital structure. In this point, we have to minimize the financial risk. These are the points comes under importance of capital structure. Next is the factors determining capital structure. Here we have to discuss what are the factors determining capital structure. First one, risk of cash insolvency. Number two, risk in variation of earnings. Number three, cost of capital. Number four, control. Number five, trading on equity. Number six, government policies. Number seven, size of the company. Number eight, needs of the investors. Number nine, flexibility. Number 10, period of finance. These are the points comes under factors determining capital structure. Now we discuss one by one. The first one is the risk of cash insolvency. Risk of cash insolvency arises due to failure to pay fixed interest and liabilities. Generally, the higher proportion of debt in capital structure compels the company to pay higher rate of interest on debt, irrespective of the fact that the fund is available or not. The non-payment of interest charges and principal amount in time called for liquidation of the company. So this is the points of risk of cash insolvency. The sudden withdrawal of the debt funds from the company can cause cash insolvency. This risk factor has an important bearing in determining the capital structure of a company, and it can be avoided if the project is financed by issues equity share capital. Next point is the risk in variation of earnings. Here, the risk is comes under different variations. The higher the debt content in the capital structure of your company, the higher will be the risk of variation in the expected earnings available to equity shareholders. If return on investment on total capital employed, that is shareholders fund plus long-term debt, exceeds the interest rate, the shareholders get a higher return. On the other hand, if interest rate exceeds return on investment, the shareholders may not get any return at all. Here we have to minimize the risk of earnings. Next is the cost of capital. Cost of capital means cost of raising the capital from different sources of funds. It is the price paid for using the capital. A business enterprise should generate enough revenue to meet its cost of capital and finance its future growth. The finance manager should consider the cost of each sources of fund while designing the capital structure of a company. Next is the control. The consideration of retaining control of the business is an important factor in capital structure decisions. If the existing equity shareholders do not like to dilute the control, they may prefer debt capital to equity capital as farmer has no voting rights. Here, there is no rights for preference shareholders, other capital. Next is the trading on equity. The use of fixed interest bearing securities along with owner's equity has sources of finance known as trading on equity. It is an arrangement by which the company aims at increasing the return on equity shares by the use of fixed interest bearing securities. Here the securities are debentures, preference shares, etc. If the existing capital structure of the company consists mainly of the equity shares, the return on equity shares can be increased by using borrowed capital. This is so because the interest paid on debentures is a deductible debenture for income tax assessment, and the after tax cost of debenture becomes very low. Any excess earnings over the cost of debt will be added up to the equity shareholders. If the rate of return on total capital employed exceeds the rate of interest on debt equity capital, or rate of dividend on preference share capital, the company is said to be trading on equity. Next is the government policies. The capital structure is influenced by government policies, rules and regulations of SEBI and lending policies of financial institutions, and change the financial pattern of the company totally. Monetary and physical policies of the government will also affect the capital structure decisions. Next, number 7, size of the company. Availability of the funds is greatly influenced by the size of the company. A small company finds it difficult to raise debt capital. The terms of debentures and long-term loans are less favorable to such enterprises. Small companies have to depend more on the equity shares and retained earnings. On the other hand, large companies issues various types of securities despite the fact that they pay less interest because investors consider large companies less risky. Here, we have to invest the finance the size of the company. Next is the needs of the investors. While deciding capital structure, the financial conditions and psychology of different types of investors will have to be kept in mind. For example, a poor or middle class investor may only be able to invest in equity or preference shares, which are usually of small denominations. Only a financially sound investor can afford to invest in debentures of higher denominations. A cautious investor who wants his capital to grow will prefer equity shares. Here, needs of the investors. We always invest the needs of the investors. Next, flexibility. The capital structures of a company should be such that it can raise funds as and when required. Flexibility provides room for expansion, both in terms of lower impact and cost and with no significant rise in risk profile. So here the business is always in flexibility condition. Next is the period of finance. The period of finance is needed to also influences the capital structure. When funds are needed for long term, that is long term means say 10 years, it should be raised by issuing debentures or preference shares. Funds should be raised by the issue of equity shares when it is needed permanently. So we have to maintain the period of finance. These are the points comes under factors of capital structure. Next is the determining debt and equity proportion. How to we divide the proportion? Here, definition of debt and equity ratio. The debt and equity ratio is a measure of the relative contribution of the creditors and shareholders or owners in the capital employed in business. Simply stated, ratio of the total long-term debt and equity capital in the business is called the debt and equity ratio. It can be calculated using a formula. Okay, here ratio of the total long-term debt and equity capital in the business is called the debt and equity ratio. Here, this financial tool gives an idea of how much borrowed capital, that means debt, can be fulfilled in the event of liquidation using shareholder contributions. It is used for the assessment of financial leverage and soundness of a firm and is typically calculated using previous fiscal year's data. A low debt equity ratio is favorable from investment viewpoint as it is less risky in times of increasing interest rates. It therefore attracts additional capital for further investment and expansion of the business. Next is what are the significance of debt and equity ratio? When examine the health of a company, it is critical to pay attention to the debt and equity ratio. If the ratio is increasing, the company is being financed by creditors rather than from its own financial sources, which may be a dangerous trend. Lenders and investors usually prefer low debt to equity ratios because their interests are better protected in the event of business decline. Here, debt and equity ratios, debt is very less in condition and equity ratio is in higher in condition. A high debt equity ratio generally means that a company has been aggressive in financing its growth with debt. This can result in volatile earnings as a result of additional interest expenses. If a lot of debt is used to finance increased operations, the company could potentially generate more earnings than it would have without this outside financing. If this were to increase earnings by a greater amount than the debt cost, then the shareholders benefit as more earnings are being spread among the same amount of shareholders. However, the cost of this debt financing may outweigh the return that the company generates on the debt through investment and business activities and become too much for the company to handle. This can lead to bankruptcy, which would leave shareholders with nothing. Optimal debt to equity ratio is considered to be about 1. That is, liabilities equal equity. But the ratio is very industry specific because it depends on the proportion of current and non-current assets. The more non-current the assets, that is, as in the capital intensive industries, the more equity is required to finance these long-term investments. Here, debt to equity formula. Debt to equity equals total liabilities divided by total shareholders equity. Here, a high debt divided by equity ratio is usually a red flag indicating that in the case of solvency of the company will go bankrupt with not enough equity to cover the debts. A low debt equity ratio indicates lower risk since the debt is lesser than the available equity. Here, the debt is very less and equity is very high. That is very useful for our business. A debt to equity ratio is an important part of ratio analysis performed under financial analysis. It is included under gearing ratios, that is capital structure mixture, with time interest earned ratio, debt ratio, and equity ratio. Here, gearing ratios are a metric used to demonstrate the funding of an entity's operations, that is, whether it was covered through debt or the investment made by shareholders. Next is the limitations of the debt to equity ratio. Debt and equity ratio may misguide the potential investors as well as since a low debt to equity ratio can be a result of the company not appropriately financing the assets with the debt obtained. This is an indication of technical inefficiency which would result in lower returns even if the debt and equity ratio is low. Next, the optimal debt and equity ratio, that is 1:1, cannot be widely used for all the industries out there. Here depends upon the organization, size of the organization. A capital intensive entity may have a high debt and equity ratio indicating that net assets have been regularly maintained and financed through the debts obtained, which would increase returns in the future due to higher production. However, a low capital industry does not need to investment in factories and types of equipment. Hence, its optimal ratio should be around 1:1. This is one of the major limitations of the debt and equity ratio since it can only compare similar companies' financial performance. Next, debt to equity ratio requires context to understand. A person who is not well versed with accounting may not be able to defer the terminologies mentioned in the balance sheet. A clear understanding of the terms equity and liability is required to understand the concept and objective of the debt and equity ratio. These are the points comes under limitations of the debt and equity ratio. Here, Debt and equity ratio, also termed as debt equity ratio, is a long-term solvency ratio that indicates the soundness of long-term financial policies of a company. It shows the relation between the proportion of assets financed by creditors and the proportion of assets financed by stockholders. As the debt equity ratio expresses the relationship between external equity and internal equity. It is also known as external internal equity ratio. Here, how to calculate the debt and equity ratio? Here we discuss formula. Debt and equity ratio is calculated by dividing total liabilities by stockholders' equity. Debt to equity ratio equal total liabilities divided by stockholders' equity. The numerator consists of the total of current and long-term liabilities, and the denominator consists of the total of stockholders' equity, including preferred stock. Both the elements of the formula are obtained from company's balance sheet. Here we are giving one example of ABC company has applied for a loan. The lender of the loan requests you to compute the debt to equity ratio as a part of the long-term solvency test of the company. The liabilities and stockholders equity section of the balance sheet of ABC company is given below. Here, current liabilities and stockholders equity. Current liabilities here, accounts payable $2,900. Accrued expenses payable 450, short-term notes payable 150. Here, total current liabilities means here we are adding the amount 3,500, the sum of total current liabilities. Next, long-term liabilities. Here, 6% bonds payable. Here, 6% bonds means 3,750. Total liabilities means the total current liabilities and long-term liabilities you have to add it. That means total liabilities 7,250. Next, we have to calculate the stockholders' equity. 6% preferred stock per value $100,000. Common stock per value 3,000. Additional paid in capital 500. Total paid in capital means we have to add the amounts 4,500. In retained earnings 4,000. Next, total stockholders equity is 8,500. Next, the equity shareholders total liabilities and stockholders equity 15,750. Required compute debt to equity ratio of ABC company is debt to equity ratio equal total liabilities divided by stockholders equity. Here the total liabilities is 7,250 divided by stockholders equity is 8,500, 0.85. The debt to equity ratio of ABC company is 0.85 or 0.85 is to 1. It means the liabilities are 85% of the stockholders equity, or we can say that the creditors provides 85 cents for each dollar provided by stockholders to the finance the assets. Next is the theories of capital structure. Here, the theories of capital structure classified into 4 types. Number 1, net income approach. Number 2, net operating income approach. Number 3, the traditional approach. Number 4, Modigliani and Miller approach. Now we discuss one by one theory. First one is the net income approach. What do you mean by net income approach? According to this approach, a firm can minimize the weighted average cost of capital and increase the value of the firm as well as market price of the equity shares by using debt financing to the maximum possible extent. The theory propounds that a company can increase its value and reduces the overall cost of capital by increasing the proportion of debt in its capital structure. This approach is based on the following assumptions. This approach is based on upon the following assumptions. Number one, the cost of debt is less than the cost of equity. We have to maintain. Next, second one, there are no taxes. Third one, the risk perception of investors is not changed by the use of debt. The line of argument in favor of net income approach is that as the proportion of debt financing in capital structure increases, the proportion of cheaper sources of funds increases. This results in the decrease in overall cost of capital, leading to an increase in the value of the firm. The reasons for assuming cost of debt to be less than the cost of equity are that interest rates are usually lower than dividing rates due to element 2 risk and the benefit of tax as the interest is a deductible expenses. So in this concept, we have to maintain less debt in our business. Next is the net operating income approach. This theory is suggested by a Durant is another extreme of the effect of the leverage on the value of the firm. According to this approach, change in the capital structure of a company does not affect the market value of the firm and the overall cost of capital remains constant irrespective of the method of financing. In this method of financing, it implies that the overall cost of capital remains the same, whether the debt and equity mix is 50:50 or 2:80 or 0:100. Thus, there is nothing as an optimal capital structure, and every capital structure is the optimum capital structure. This theory presumes that the market capitalizes the value of the firm as a whole. Next, the business risk remains constant at every level of the debt equity mix. The reasons propounded for such assumptions are that the increased use of debt increases the financial risk of the equity shareholders and hence the cost of equity increases. On the other hand, the cost of debt remains constant with the increase in the proportion of debt as the financial risk of the lenders is not affected. Thus, the advantage of using the cheaper source of funds debt is exactly offset by the increased cost of equity. Next is the traditional approach, that means olden one. The traditional approach, also known as the intermediate approach, is a compromise between two extremes of net income approach and net operating income approach. According to this theory, the value of the firm can be increased initially or the cost of capital can be decreased by using more debt as the debt is cheaper source of funds than equity. Thus, optimum capital structure can be reached by a proper debt equity mix. Beyond a particular point, the cost of equity increases because increased debt and increase the financial risk of the equity shareholders. The advantages of cheaper debt at this point of capital structure is offset by increased cost of equity. After this, there comes a stage when the increased cost of equity cannot be offset by the advantage of low cost debt. Thus, overall cost of capital, according to this theory, decrease up to certain point remains more or less unchanged for moderate increase in debt thereafter, and increase or rises beyond a certain point. Even the cost of debt may increases at this stage due to increased financial risk. Next is the Modigliani and Miller approach. That means approach. And hypothesis is identical with the net operating income approach if taxes are ignored. However, when corporate taxes are assumed to exist, their hypothesis is similar to the net income approach. The first point, in the absence of taxes, the theory proves that the cost of capital is not affected by changes in the capital structure, or says that the debt equity mix is irrelevant in the determination of the total value of a firm. Next, the reason argued is that though debt is cheaper to equity when increased use of debt as a source of finance, the cost of equity increases. This increases in cost of equity offset the advantage of the low cost of debt. Thus, although the financial leverage affects the cost of equity, the overall cost of capital remains constant. The theory emphasizes the fact that a firm's operating income is a determinant of its total value. The theory further propounds that beyond a certain limit of debt, the cost of debt increases, but the cost of equity falls, thereby again balancing the two costs. In the opinion of Modigliani and Miller, two identical firms in all respects except their capital structure and cannot have different market values or cost of capital because of arbitrate process. In case two identical firms except of their capital structure have different market values or cost of capital arbitrage will take place and the investors will engage in personal leverage. That means they will buy equity of the other company in preference to the company having lesser value as against the corporate leverage, and this will again render the two firms to have the same total value. In this, Modigliani Miller approach is based upon the following assumptions. Number one, there are no corporate taxes. There is a perfect market. Number three, investors act rationally. Number four, the expected earnings of all the firms have identical risk characteristics. Number five, the cutoff point of investment in a firm is capitalization rate. Number six, risk to investors depend upon the random fluctuations of expected earnings and the possibility and the actual value of the variables may turn out to be different from the best estimates. Number seven, all earnings are distributed to the shareholders. These are the points comes under assumption of there is no taxes. Next is the when the corporate taxes are assumed to be exist, corporate taxes is available. Modigliani and Miller in their article of 1963 have recognized that the value of the firm will increase, the cost of capital will be decreased with the use of debt on accountant of deductibility of interest charges for tax purpose. Thus, the optimum capital structure can be achieved by maximizing the debt mix in the equity of your firm. Thank you to all.